Hey, welcome to the Commerce Hero Show. Today we are talking B2B commerce, joined by a couple of very special guests. Joined by Yoav Kutner, co-founder at Oro Inc. Yoav is having some issues with the camera, so it looks like we'll be voice only. But Yoav, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I actually shaved and put on a nice T-shirt and everything. I'm so bummed I can't be seen. What is that?
Bummer. We'll have to figure it out. I'm sure conspiracy theories are going to start to abound on what happened here. Also here with Isaiah.
He didn't want to say that.
Also here with Isaiah Bollinger of Trellis. Isaiah, how's it going?
Good. I'm happy to be on. It was great the first time being on not too long ago. So
awesome. So Yoav, quick question. Have you ever heard of a little e-commerce platform called Magento?
I think so. It rings a bell. Let me say that.
Rings a bell. Sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, something like I looked at, or I look at so many things.
Yeah, there's so many of these things out there. So we're gonna talk about what are some of the use cases where Oro makes sense. What are some of the use cases where Magento makes sense? What are some of the strengths and weaknesses between the two? Yoav, obviously, you as the CTO co-founder of Magento itself are going to bring a very unique opinion to this. And so I'm excited to dig into this. Maybe one way that we can get started is, Yoav, I think that you had kind of seen some of the pain points around the reason why you built Oro was some of the pain points you saw with Magento and things like that. I'd love to get into that, sort of the reason why you built Oro and some of those things. But before that, why don't we start off nice and friendly with what are some things that you think that Magento does well?
So Magento, definitely we designed it to solve the B2C use case. And I think as such, it does that job for sure, as well as any other platform out there. I think plus the flexibility that we kind of provide, the ability to customize the use cases to the specific merchant, the specific needs that the merchants have, definitely puts Magento up there compared to any other of the platforms that were on that scale. We were also able to kind of scale it to some of the use cases of the B2C, again, with caching and stuff like that. So early on, when we started Magento, definitely we kind of started providing a solution to smaller merchants that were able now to have technology that looks and feels and has features like the big guys. So definitely bringing up kind of the e-commerce B2C world closer to where the bigger players were at the time. I think we did a good job on that. We did create a really nice community around the product. I think that's one of the biggest assets Magento has today. The community of developers, of course, system integrators, and of course, merchants. So I think the community of Magento is definitely one of the strongest assets of Magento today.
Still going strong even after you've since left.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised. No. Despite
Nice.
It's being nice to see how the community is continuing and actually evolving. I mean, there's a lot of the old faces that I knew, but there's a bunch of new guys. I love it when I'm in a conference and this is young guys, in their 20s come up to me and say, yeah, but I like Magento, and the guys at Magento knew what they're doing. You're new, and you don't know, who you are. So it's awesome. It's all good. Yeah.
That's what's interesting.
I'm young, but I'm not that stupid.
So Isaiah, what's you guys? Maybe you can talk a little bit about some of what you guys have done around B2B for the past several years. I think 6 years or so, I believe. And what are some of the strengths of Magento that you see?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We kind of fell into B2B e-commerce when I started out. It was kind of all over the place, just hungry, trying to get clients, and definitely saw a gap with both B2C and B2B, but especially B2B back in 2012 with distributors, manufacturers. They were just in the very early stages of getting serious with e-commerce. So we evaluated the platforms, and we used a lot of different platforms. Honestly, probably used like 20 or 30 different platforms at least in the first year that I started the agency. Or didn't necessarily build the site, but we had taken over sites or been exposed to sites on these platforms. And to us, Magento was the clear winner at the time for B2C and B2B, because it kind of had all the B2C kind of things that you have mentioned, but it also had like multi-site and customer groups and tiered pricing and a lot of personalization that you could create for B2B. So we actually, so in 2012, 13 ish, the first like year or two that I started, made a lot of mistakes. It was my first time starting a real company, and I quickly realized like there was a point where we were doing like way too much. So I was like, we gotta narrow our focus. So I focused in on Magento and WordPress. WordPress, obviously, the natural fit for content and the non-e-commerce sites, and then Magento, the natural fit for e-commerce, and it had the flexibility where we could work with pretty much anyone's tiny startup. Obviously, it's tougher when they don't have a lot of money, but all the way up to the big enterprise. So it was the only platform that we saw that had that kind of range of capability. So
right,
which
awesome.
I think is pretty cool. So.
Right. Well, hey, and by the way, anybody that's in the live chat, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in with those. We'll try to get those addressed. But Yoav, so maybe you could talk a little bit about why you started Oro, also a little bit about the ecosystem, because I know there's Oro CRM, there's the platform, there's other products built on top of the platform like Akinio, and then there's Oro Commerce, which I believe is one of the newer sort of products in the ecosystem. So what was kind of your reason for starting it, and what's sort of that ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually started the Oro Inc., the company, about 4 or 5 months after I left Magento, so in 2012. And the reason we started Oro, was because we really wanted to continue working together, the same team that kind of built Magento. We felt that we can do a lot more innovation when it comes to developing products. And honestly, because that's what I like to do. A lot of people ask me, are you sure? And I'm like, yes, I like doing this. I like working with companies. I like solving technology issues, building products, interacting with the community and stuff. So Oro started, we actually started doing Magento projects. We were called in by our fellow people at Magento to help with some of the bigger implementations. So we worked with that. That helped us kickstart the company, bootstrap everything. Kind of profitable, week 6 into the company already. So that was kind of cool. But that allowed us immediately to go into our passion, which is creating new products. This time around, again, we took a lot of what we learned at Magento and said, okay, what do we want to do different? The first thing being the Oro platform. And that came from a result of actually looking at how a lot of developers and companies are trying to use Magento in use cases that are not necessarily e-commerce. And we found developers trying to use Magento for file sharing, video sharing apps, social networks, anything you would imagine. When I started talking to these kind of developers, we asked, well, what's the reason you picked Magento? Why did you start with Magento, not from a framework or write your own code, et cetera? And they said, well, we have a lot of the features we're looking for example, all the admin, user management, and stuff like that. Now, the truth was that Magento, we did not build it as a platform for designing other business application. We were very domain specific to B2C. So a lot of times, even though it looked very appealing to start with Magento to build these custom apps, it turned out that they had to invest a lot in kind of decoupling a lot of the features in order to use it in a general use case. So we decided this time, let's contribute back and try to build another ecosystem around what we're doing. When we designed what we call Oro Platform, and that's kind of a layer between the framework, which we're using Symfony as the framework, and our applications. And the idea is that we use Oro Platform as a general purpose business application platform. And that's a mouthful, but that means that we have a lot of the features are features that you would find in many different business applications. For example, the user management, the whole navigation structure, entity management, report engine, workflow engine, which we'll touch about a bit later. And all those are basically available out of the box. You can install the Oro platform and you'll get an empty application, as we call it, or domainless application that doesn't do much, but allows you to create users and workflows for those users and entities, et cetera. So the idea here is to solve a problem that, again, we saw in Magento, and analysts actually also point out that about 50% of business applications are actually homegrown or custom built. And we wanted to help these companies that, they don't have to go and do everything from scratch over and over again. They can build on top of our platform. We also found that other companies were building their own products on that, and which is a great thing, of course. So Akeneo is using some of our components from our platform. Akeneo is an open source PIM that shamelessly I've co-founded as well, so I'm plugging them in. But others that I'm not involved.
And they've started to make acquisitions themselves.
Right. Yeah, they went into the AI world and enriching products through AI. So doing a lot of the work automatically for merchants that have to enrich their product information. And it's actually a great demo, again, for a different topic, but I encourage people, of course, to look at that. Moving forward, again, there's Morello. They're building an ERP, open source ERP / order management on top of our platform. There's a HR role, which is a HR a suite around our product. So again, we're seeing this growing. We're seeing more and more implementations that are just around the platform. Of course, we have our own customers that are actually using the platform to build different use cases. One, of course, is that we talk about a lot is a company that's in the financial advising world, and they have a network of financial advisors. And and they looked all over. They started with CRM actually, and actually found out that that's not what they need. And then they found us. They're building this. They started building it internally for their 5,000 financial advisor network, and then started using that as a product that they're white labeling for their industry now. So again, just building this on top of our platform. And government of Argentina is using it for what we call citizen relation management and all the interactions with citizens. So again, a lot of this. So that's great. And we were very excited about how this is coming to live now. But the product that we started with was the CRM product, Oro CRM, and that was released around the same time as the platform. So again, 2013, we released that. And that was just our take on the CRM and what we saw that, the world calls products by the term CRM, but they do much more or much less than we were expecting. They don't really manage any relationship with your customers. They're actually just managing pipelines. And any other attempt to do that, especially when we were trying to integrate it back in the day with Magento, was very artificial, meaning that, if you have a shopping cart, what do you do with that? Is that a lead? Is that an opportunity? And our take on that, well, it should be a shopping cart. And marketers should treat that as a shopping cart. And you want to create a really good user experience around everything, and having, marketers, customer service reps, everybody in the company have a view of the customer and what we call the 360 view in a single place. So that was the Oro CRM. Take. Since then, the product, was downloaded we're close to almost 1 million now times. But total product installs that we seeing through these same technique we were doing at Magento for getting notifications. We see about we just surpassed 300,000 active installs of our products, including Oro Commerce as well. So it's growing, it's happening, and we're really excited. We're actually tapping into a much larger community, which is the Symphony community, which again is a great community. Solutions, of course, like Drupal, Acquia is using it. So we're really excited to be part of that ecosystem as well. So nice. I'm already going pretty long here, so just quickly, Oro Commerce. Oro Commerce actually surprisingly came from two directions. One was something that we remembered again from our Magento days, where more and more of the companies where we are working with at Magento did not have the traditional B2C use case. And when we actually started digging deeper into that, they actually were B2B companies, meaning companies that are selling to other companies. And there is the regular approach that everybody's thinking of, which I'll call the Staples or Amazon for Business, where we call it the self-serve, basically allowing companies to reach out to you. And that's great, and buy off your website. But what we actually started seeing through the CRM world was more and more companies that have a sales force, a sales team, that actually has been interacting with their customers, but in what we call a pen and paper world, right? Right. And the most sophisticated ones were using emails. But it's a really archaic world where we found that a lot of them are trying to go through this digital transformation and convert their business to digital and move it online, etc. And that's what actually brought us these two aspects, both the B2B companies with the sales team and the self-serve, put us back in the market to see what's out there, right? And that's something we knew that we fell short of doing at Magento. And of course, that's what we're going to talk about. And we decided that maybe it's time to solve the B2B e-commerce kind of problem, or give a solution and build a product for that, for those kind of merchants' needs. And I'm sure we'll go deeper into what that means. But again, we couldn't find anybody that was doing it great. To be honest, we were trying to do it with Magento, and it took much longer than we expected. And we had to override too many core features to actually do it, to the point where our customers that were in that space were owning that solution rather than using a platform to kind of build on. So again, our kind of philosophy is always that our product should bring customers anywhere from 70 to 80% of the way, and 30 to 20% of that should be customizations and integrations. And we really didn't feel that Magento was servicing that for the B2B world, and we decided to launch our own product for that. So that's the long-winded answer for that.
Yeah, that's I feel like I got the full unabridged story there. That was
yeah,
that was great. And by the way, if you guys have any questions for each other that you want to fire back and forth, feel free. I don't need to get in the way. I'll try to keep the conversation moving.
I wish we had more time, but I'm definitely interested to talk more about the less traditional things that you're talking about, like the financial services and that kind of stuff. But maybe we should do a follow-up to this, because unfortunately my time's kind of limited for personal reasons, so I can't stay on forever today. But
it looks
I'll
like
we'll back to you, Kalen.
okay, sure. So actually, one question that popped in here from Daniel, which I think might get us right into the heart of the matter, is I found in my B2B experience that many customers have similar wants, needs to B2C customers, but they just need a few B2B ordering features. With Magento, it's natural to present the B2C site, and then to add the B2B features in to suit the bigger customers. So does it make sense to have a Magento B2C site as well as an Oro B2B site in that scenario? So that's maybe a question for you, Yoav. You can give maybe a quick answer to that, and then we can get Isaiah's thoughts on it as well.
Sure. So we do see a lot of the customers that are coming to us that we'll call it multi-channel or omni-channel or whatever you want to kind of call them. They do have a B2B and a B2C channel. There's a whole new aspect of this, of course, where we'll talk about, again, the self-serve model, Amazon for Business. It's I think it's not in this specific question, but a lot of our customers do both B2C and B2B. And the answer is if to use a B2C and a B2B platform, or use one platform to do both, like everything we do in our world, writing custom application building and stuff like that, is to see the actual use cases. And yeah, some B2B companies or B2B use cases are very simple, where most of the orders and everything come from the B2C channel. And just once in a while, you get a quote or you get a large order and stuff like that. And then you'll say, yeah, maybe it's just a few features that we need to customize on the B2C. But most of what I'm doing is B2C. Our customers tend to be the flip of that. They, one customer that comes to mind that we are just launching right now is a $500 million company. It's a manufacturer of, I won't get into what they do yet, but they're a manufacturer, and they have, out of this 500 million revenue a year, they have this B2C channel, but it's $4.5 million, right? Versus the rest that is B2B.
Right.
Yet when they started with Magento, they actually, built a B2C website. So, because that's what Magento knows to do, and that's how it feels. It feels like you go to the website today, and you feel like you're at a B2C website. And if you're a B2B customer that generates most of their revenues, you can't use this website, or you feel that it's not for you, and you go away and you pick up the phone and you interact with their sales reps.
Right.
So the idea is, again, that it all depends. If you're a B2C company that does, a few quotes or a few large orders or whatnot, yeah, you can maybe use an extension or customize it. But if you're a B2B company, and most of the companies that we are working with are not necessarily the SMB size, they're more in the mid-market to enterprise size companies, they're much more sophisticated on the B2B side than they are on the B2C. So that means we can solve today with Oro having a B2C and a B2B site for them in a single site or multiple websites, depending on how they want to set it up. But we can answer their requirements for the B2C. Like I said, sometimes it's a fraction of their total revenues and what they focus on and the customers that they interact with. And we can solve that use case in a single place. We have customers that are sophisticated on both. And one of our customers, Samuel Hubbard, actually has a B2C site on Magento and the B2B site launched on Oro. So with them using Oro, they actually starting to see that maybe they don't really need both. So actually, they're trying to now migrate to our B2C as well. But like I said, it's really what the merchant needs. If they're more sophisticated on B2B, you want to match them with a B2B platform. If they're sophisticated on B2C, B2C should do it. Gotcha.
And so Isaiah, what are your thoughts on the B2B, B2C hybrid space, and maybe even more broadly, Yoav talked a little bit about some of the types of customers that they have. What are the types of customers that you guys have dealt with in that space?
Yeah, it's mainly manufacturers and distributors, but I'm a big believer in trying to consolidate down to one site with kind of special user permissions to customize for the B2B personal experience. Amazon, I actually literally wrote about this on the Magento blog. So if you go to the small business blog, there's like probably a explanation that's better than what I'm going to give right now. But I'm a big believer in making it one experience. So it's just like one site. And actually I'll use examples of me buying online because we buy as a business. So I just negotiated with Apple and Lenovo, our two main vendors for equipment. And I'm actually kind of annoyed that they make me go to this like separate site and I can never remember the URL and I got to like bookmark that URL and it's annoying. And in Magento, all I have to do is just like, there's some easy ways to create some customer groups or personalize that. They obviously also launched the B2B module in 2.2. So that has quoting, just a lot more functionality around B2B. So for the most part, you could do a lot of that out of the box with Magento, but there can be small customizations that you need. I think it can be pretty easily done. I think people kind of overthink it and overcomplicate it, and part of that is that businesses, especially these manufacturers and distributors, overcomplicate it because they have old processes in place. And all they actually have to do is change those processes to be way simpler using these new tools. And sometimes that's not always that easy, but I think it can be done. And sometimes we account for their old processes, which can be a little bit more heavy lifting of development. But I think then the real I think heavy lifting with B2B, from my experience, is one, the catalog. If you have a huge catalog with distributors of like 100,000 products, and then they have it coming from different manufacturers, and you have to normalize all that data, that gets really complicated. And there's not like, there's sort of ways to automate that, but there's always going to need to be some human intervention, I think. That gets complicated. And so obviously PIM solutions like Akinio, or, we've had a lot of success with Salsify. I really, really like Salsify, and Sales Layer as well. So there's a lot of PIM solutions that can help with that. But then, so long story short, the problem is that then you need to integrate with all these things. So, and a lot of also B2B companies are on legacy applications, and they're just not going to change their ERP system or their, back office. So you need to integrate with that. So I think that's, to me, honestly, I think the integrations is probably one of the biggest challenges, because some of these guys are on old 90s systems, and that's their record of management for orders or whatever it is. So I don't think it's that difficult to build on Magento, or even out of the box with Magento, like these kind of custom experiences for B2B. I think it's the integrations and getting all their data to be accurate and getting their payment gateway to work, or maybe they might have complex payment methods that they need because they have like multiple different payment methods. So right. Yeah, I would say the integrations from our experience can be the most tricky. So yeah,
gotcha.
I can get more into that, but
yeah, no, that'd be great. By the way, it looks like Yoav's video is in.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what?
There's a reason why I used to be a CTO. If I needed to solve that. It felt like,
yeah. I was thinking to myself, man, that's gotta be killing you. That's great to see. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Chrome. Believe it or not, I'm using a developer version of Chrome, and it works on that.
Yeah.
So. Oh God, nice.
I remember they had another version.
I was maybe an interesting way to talk apples to apples here a little bit is maybe we can pick a use case like we've talked. Isaiah, you talked about you have manufacturers, distributors generally as clients. You talk a bit about the types of larger, really B2B heavy customers you have. Maybe we can take a use case and kind of talk through some of the specifics of features on the Magento side, Isaiah, how you like to implement them, and then maybe Yoav, how you might tweak that with an Oro mindset. So Isaiah, if we could give kind of an example, obviously not an actual customer, but maybe an example of the type of a specific manufacturer, maybe their size, their scale, maybe how much they do B2B, how much they do B2C, some of the features that are important to them, the ways that you might build that out with Magento, and then we can maybe compare, contrast.
Yeah, I think the basic example is, a manufacturer that just, has whatever, let's just say 1,000 SKUs. They build their kind of B2C experience. It's kind of the straightforward B2C experience on Magento. And then it really depends on how they run their B2B program. So some companies I've seen go as crazy as having every single customer has a different price for like each individual SKU, which is like pretty much the most complicated scenario, and I think that they should probably change that.
Right.
But I've seen companies that they're like, that's our requirement. I'm just like, oh my God. So that can be done, and obviously that's more complicated in terms of configuration and development with Magento. But I think a more common scenario is they have customer groups. So maybe they have like 10 different levels. They have like basic B2B, B2B 2, 3, 4, like different kind of gold stars as you go down the tiers based on how much the volume they're buying. And you have different price discounts associated with that. And then maybe they have tiered pricing on each individual product level. And then, so I think I'm more talking about the self-serve model to Yoav's point. And I think the self-serve model still has a long ways to go. I mean, I've seen companies that are doing 10 million online with like some random platform, terrible design. And I'm just like, how is that even possible? So imagine if they had like just a good design and like a little bit better features, they should be easily doing 20, 30, 40 million online. So I think that I kind of focus on that model because I think there's just still so much room to grow there that it's pretty ridiculous. So, to continue on that, then they also need the back end integrations, and then that's where the Magento community is so strong. There's a lot of extensions for the various integrations. So typically we look for a quality extension or a solution there. Our backup option is we'll custom build it, but obviously that's more expensive. So
okay,
that's kind of the backup option.
So with this use case, like the manufacturer, 1,000 SKUs, they want a different price per each customer. First of all, like what's the general scale of this manufacturer? Like,
it depends. I mean, I think we
just
personally
to take
work with more like
example.
Yeah, we personally work with more like $10 to $250 million size companies. And that's just because honestly, it's easier to work with them and you don't have to go through a ton of bureaucracy. And, we do have some larger customers, but it's just a pain in the ass to sign them.
Okay. So let's say it's $100 million manufacturer, 1,000 SKUs. And how much B2B, what's their B2B, B2C split? Just to take.
I would say usually they're a little bit more B2B. So maybe like 70, 80% selling to retailers, selling to so I'd say they're maybe a little bit more B2B, and maybe they're only like 10 to 20% online, and they're also selling multi-channel. So they might be selling on Amazon, eBay, and that's where like a connector, there's a lot of connectors for that you can connect with Magento.
So that sounds like a use case that might have some overlap. So like on the thing where they want a price per each customer, and you're like, Magento's not going to do that.
Well, we'll do that. They're just going to have to pay us more money to do that.
Okay. So how would you generally, I guess, how would you generally implement that? And then like, does that even make sense? Like it feels to me intuitively like that's the kind of thing you want to have customer groups for that kind of pricing. And then I'd also be interested, Yoav, in how you guys would tackle that kind of a thing.
Yeah, so one-to-one pricing, I mean, they'd have to have some sort of database, and usually I think it's either in Salesforce or their ERP, where it's like the pricing and like the SKU level pricing associated with the customer, and we just have to integrate that into Magento. However we decide, we may just kind of customize the customer functionality in Magento a little bit to do that, to create that, make sure that integration works well. So honestly, that all depends on how they're running that in their back office, and that could be a million different ways.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
And then
I'm biting my lips here. I want to jump in. I think this is exactly where we were in the project that we were talking about. Why we felt that
Yeah.
Magento was underserving this kind of industry.
Yeah.
This is again, maybe on a $10 million manufacturer, they willing to learn, and the size of customers we're working with today and the customers we're seeing that are really serious about going through a digital transformation, if we would come to them and tell them, you don't need real or personal pricing for your customers, they'll say, you're right, it's not only for the customers, because we also have contracts for each customer, so multiply this by 10 or 15 or 20 or 100. So that's exactly one of the features that we kind of focused on. We learned, again, where Magento falls short, or any B2C. I won't only throw Magento under the bus here, but any B2C platform, the pricing is built for the B2C use case. Again, we're kind of trying to say, we're trying to give it at the best price possible. To whoever comes to the store, we're actually trying to be competitive, try to keep our margins, whatever. Yeah, user groups, if you're a VIP, maybe we'll give you another 5%, but that's not the use case in the B2B. B2B prices are negotiated. If you can believe that you'll come to a business and say, for you to go online, you have to change your whole business structure when it comes to pricing, and tell your customers that all pricing is the same, that's not going to happen. Again, we actually have a customer that will argue that and saying he's, kind of bringing a new flavor to the market. There's a single pricing for everybody, but that's not the general rule here. It's exceptions. And I think, again, we're far, far away from having single pricing for customers in B2B. And in Oro, we actually solved that. So we didn't go around it. We didn't say, it's hard, or we'll convince them not to do that. We actually built this feature from scratch, right? And that's one of the deepest features we actually invested in on an architectural level. So it's not an afterthought. It's not an extension that you install or multiple extensions just to get this feature. This was built out of the,
that's really part of the core of the product.
It's part of the actual modules that we invested in a lot. So we can scale it to infinite number of prices and price books and price lists and whatever is relevant for the actual business and industry. And taking that, even if it's in the ERP, like you mentioned, all the implementations that we've seen that are kind of trying to do real-time pricing from the ERP, they suck. The user experience sucks. It takes too long to load pricing directly from the ERP. The ERPs are not necessarily built for that. Again, if they're using some kind of modern ERP, maybe there's even an API, but most of our customers I'll say about at least 50% of them, their ERPs are homegrown or archaic or built in the 80s or 90s and don't even have a good API for us to do real-time pricing, and definitely not in an efficient way. So that is really the job of our platform, to get millions and millions of prices in, run them efficiently. I absolutely agree with you. You don't have to have a single price for every product, for every customer, again, multiplied by contract pricing, but you do have to be able to manage this efficiently. So we have this concept of rollback and fallback. So just the relevant pricing have to be put in those lists, and the rest can actually fall back to other price lists. We still have the layer of customer groups, if you want to still use that. We actually can go down to the individual user within our customer's company and say, these type of users that get this pricing, this type of users get maybe different pricing, like I said, on contracts, etc. So this is a very robust feature, and one that we find that we're winning when we're demoing against other B2C platforms, because this is something that in reality B2B companies still have to have this feature and not an afterthought for that.
Got it.
But how do you get around the fact that they might be using this ERP as their main source of truth? Like, doesn't that still become a problem? Or
well, that's an integration. It's not a problem. it's an integration.
It's an integration and a problem.
The integration.
It's one of the problems we have to solve. But it's most likely, again, depending on the scenario, we do have users that use, because their ERP is limited, they end up using our price engine.
Okay.
But most often than not, the prices are set in the ERP. And there's rules for us how to fetch them, right? Yeah. Prices, fortunately, like you said, we can recommend stuff to do. We do get these requests for, it has to be real time. And when we come to pricing is usually not real time. Pricing is determined and negotiated, and once it's there for recurring orders for a specific contract or recurring orders from a specific user, they're pretty much set. Again, we can apply rules on them where there's tiers. If you jump to a platinum tier, you get another additional 10% or something like that. Those are built on top of the pricing. They're your contract and negotiated pricing. But that's a feature that, again, going to B2B companies and telling them, forget how you were doing B2B business. B2C is one pricing per everyone. And if you want, we can have you customer groups. That's not going to happen anytime soon, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that companies aren't going to completely change the way that they're doing B2B, but I think they do have to adapt. Like they do have to change to some degree. Like obviously they have to change from an e-commerce perspective. And in that, I think we're seeing customers kind of like modify or adapt their operations to make that work. And I think we've seen that become pretty successful as long as it's well thought out in how it's all going to work. So
yeah, and again, I think maybe for smaller ones, it's something you can negotiate because again, they won't invest in the platform until, of course, they can find a platform that does exactly what they need. But smaller ones might a little bit change. But we worked with companies that have sales teams and sales forces, and if you come to them and tell them, one pricing for all from now on, guys.
Yeah, well,
it's going to be a mutiny. Nobody's going to use the system.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting one price per all. I mean, we're talking about normalizing it, not necessarily one-to-one, but having some sort of like, customer group associated with them. So
yeah, but we tried that, and that doesn't scale because you run into too many exceptions where the merchant will have too many exceptions to these rules, and again, you're limiting the sales team to actually
but then you just need to create like overrides for that. So
so you're basically recreating what we have out of the box, and that's the argument. Start off with a platform that's built to this use case rather than retrofitting a B2C solution.
But see, my problem the thing is, to me, it's not about like what's out of the box. It's about the bigger picture. So, I mean. You can make the argument that any one thing is better than that, but I think it's just so tough to compete with the Magento community. Like the Magento community is just so strong that it's so hard to.
It's so funny that I'm sitting on the other side of the aisle again, but I was sitting on this side when I was representing.
And I think
every ecosystem takes time to be built. You're looking at the 10-year-old.
It's a very meta conversation. Have you seen? Have you guys seen the meme?
Well, I just think
one. Sorry, just one sec. Have you guys seen the meme where there's one Spider-Man pointing at another Spider-Man and they're like the same? That's kind of how that. Sorry, but Isaiah,
I just think that Magento is going to solve that problem, and they're already working. Like they launched the B2B module not that long ago, and it was actually really impressive. So, I think they're going to do a lot of things to solve this. They obviously recognize B2B, and
well, that's an assumption, and we hope so. And but I just you mentioned it, so already. The way this was released in Magento, if you're talking about community and ecosystem, the B2B module is only available for the enterprise version.
Yeah, of course.
So limiting the size of the community, blah, 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 and kind of hurting that side as well, right?
Yeah.
We are completely open source. The differences between our community edition and enterprise edition are not about features. They're about scale and, what modules and solutions we're using to scale, like Elasticsearch, JobQ, RabbitMQ, and stuff like that. We're not about the feature set, right? So we are building a community around B2B solutions, again, rather than retrofitting. Now, because it's only available for the enterprise, it's not going to be available for community extensions. And we're seeing already, from what we know and interactions we're having with partners that are both Magento and Oro partners, that the case is when they try to use that and install community extensions, that doesn't work because they're overriding the same core features. And they, especially on the pricing, we have that on the corporate account system. It just doesn't work because it's not available for anybody really to test unless they're an enterprise user and or partner. So the argument of having this robust community around the B2B feature, I don't accept that one. I'm sorry. I mean, not with the current strategy.
We've used some of these extensions and we haven't had problems. So I mean, obviously,
again, for smaller use cases, there's a great extension. I'll plug in a card to quote. It does it, right? I mean, for small, you're getting 5-10 quotes a day, going to a general admin. Yeah, that works. But again, it's not going to grow or scale to the real solution you need.
I think it might be interesting. That's why I sort of wanted to hone in on this use case. So let's say it's this $100 million manufacturer.
Yeah.
Which is, I know that's maybe a little smaller. Some of, you've got some customers that are bigger than that, but it's probably a decent sized
it's a
manufacturer.
Good size,
And so I don't know, Isaiah, if you can speak to maybe if there's an example you can pull from of like what are some of the ways in which they were able to simplify their pricing into groups, like how did that play out if you had visibility into how the sales organization handled that, and what are some of the trade-offs they made, and how did that work out for them?
Yeah, so I mean, it wasn't. We've talked to some companies where like they just had like kind of a web strategy, and they've kept that fairly simple, and they've wanted to drive a good amount of their customer base to that kind of self-serve, simpler operations web standard of customer group for tiered pricing, as well as just the regular consumer pricing, and so they try and drive their smaller customers towards that, and then they kind of have like a different strategy for the larger enterprise customers. Which I think just makes sense in general. And we kind of do a similar thing in the way that we're trying to kind of segment the smaller opportunities and still execute them in a more kind of simpler operational capacity, and then have like more of an enterprise solution for obviously larger customers. So yeah, I mean, we find that
seems like it comes down to how critical that ability to have that level of unique pricing is, right? If they're a company where it's a not complete non-negotiable, that's built in from the ground up into Oro, and there's many features of different platforms where one platform may have a given feature more natively than another, and so it sounds like if that's a real hard requirement. I'm also interested, Isaiah, because you said if they wanted you to build one-to-one pricing, you could. And I was curious whether you had actually done that before, or whether that was sort of a theoretical example.
Well, why would you recommend as an SI to build it from scratch and go through all the pains and scalability that we went through, or use an out-of-the-box platform that was designed to do that? I'm really curious why you would recommend somebody to build a custom, very, very hard feature to build right, rather than use something that's already proven. It's very interesting for me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not as that they're like completely building this custom thing. You're just kind of modifying a piece to what's already there and integrating with that with their back office. So in this specific request, it had to come from their back office. So all the data is coming from their back office and just needs to be kind of, sent to Magento. Is coming from their back office and just needs to be kind of, sent to Magento. So for me, I guess I don't look at it as like this crazy custom thing, because we've done way crazier custom things than that. Like we're building like product customizers that's just like super complex in terms of the integration with like these crazy AI files. And so to me, it's just kind of getting the data in there in a one-to-one fashion with the customer and just making sure that works. I guess I don't view that as that crazy of a custom thing. I think they only had like 10,000 customers. So it wasn't like we're talking about like an insane amount of data.
1,000 SKUs, 10,000 customers.
Yeah, I think it was even less than that. So
what happens is hopefully get more than 10,000 customers, more price lists, more. So you basically built them a solution that can take them so far, and then they'll have to replatform. So again, maybe marrying to the right solution from scratch is the right.
I guess I just don't really see it as them having to replatform. I mean, from my experience, I haven't really seen too many. I guess the only people I've seen having to replatform for Magento, it's not even that they had to, it's that they were replatforming down to like Shopify, because it just made more sense for them to go with Shopify, because they just had like super simple operations. They just wanted.
Well, I'm smiling because I'll have to say that you mean anybody moving from Magento 1 to Magento 2 is replatforming.
Well, yeah, of course.
I think we've accepted that in the Magento community.
Yeah.
We've accepted the R word.
I agree with that, but yeah, I think for us, what we're seeing mostly in the marketplace is that people leaving,
the Magento brand, let's say.
Yeah, they're more. It's more that it's they just want something simple like Shopify, and they don't really have much of a need for an enterprise system. So, and they just want the ease of use of software as a service.
So I think the way you stated it right now probably goes back to the first question we started with: is if you're a sophisticated B2B merchant, you want to grow your B2B, business, you maybe want to be a multi-channel, have B2B and B2C. I really think you should go with a B2B platform. And you're probably not as sophisticated on B2C. If you're not sophisticated B2B and you just want to accept a few orders a day and everything, yeah, maybe any platform will do that. We know Shopify customers using B2B scenarios.
Yeah, no, we do
Shopify,
too.
so,
and it works for really basic use cases.
Right. So again, if you're basic, I think it really doesn't matter. I think we're talking about businesses that want to really take this on. transform their business, move it online, be able to grow something, and not be hit by walls every time that they start getting a new feature in. And using something that's proven exactly like you would use Magento, or what you're using as a use case for why you're selling Magento for B2C customers. You're saying big community, proven product. Again, we'll put the Magento 2 aside for a sec. But that's what you're selling. We're selling the same thing for B2B companies, and coming and telling them, use Shopify, you'll be okay. That will be a misrepresentation on our end as a SI. And doing that too.
But we're not telling B2B customers to go downgrade to Shopify. This is just people that.
No, I'm saying I'm saying downgrading them to a B2C solution and retrofitting.
I'm more talking about customers that I think or companies, manufacturers that have decided to not really do a lot with B2B commerce.
And so if they're not sophisticated under B2B and their initiative is not big, and then maybe any B2C can do that.
Small SKU counts and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, if you're serious about the transformation of your business, moving it online, I really think it will be a misservice to represent and tell them you can do this with B2C and we can do anything you want. That will be, again, I've done it. Right. I'll say I'm guilty of doing that. And when I was selling Magento to B2B, but I learned really that that's not the use case. The Magento, the B2B e-commerce use case is its own.
Well, what I can say personally in terms of what we do is like we're very careful about execution because we're the agency. So like, I think a lot of projects on every platform fail because of the agency, right? Because of the
would never blame the vendor,
So I mean, we're very careful about what we say we can do and execute on it. And we've had some tough projects, but I think we've executed on pretty much every project with maybe I'd have to look back at our history. I think there was one where I handed it off because we just kind of underquoted, and they still finished it, and they took our code and finished it, and probably didn't make.
Sounds like you should join our ecosystem and become an SI.
I knew we
look for companies.
So it's not like I'm just like, oh, we can do this, but then we can't. Like, we're obviously it's hard to hit perfect budgets. It's hard to hit perfect timelines, but like. We're still
if at the end of this call we have a follow-up where you say, I saw that you're offering Oro Commerce and Magento, and all you need to do is also offer Oro Commerce to B2B companies. I think you'll be the perfect SI.
I think Yoav's goal
is to try for everyone, and I don't want this to be like a battle of Magento. I think there's room for everyone, and I think that there's still a ton of room for Magento to grow, and I'm sure there's a ton of room for Oro to grow. Because like the B2B space is so immature, in my opinion, that like it's just in the early, like that's why I'm still focused on the self-serve, which to you is more a basic model.
It's not basic. It's one of the use cases. We solve self-serve. We solve buyer-seller interactions. We solve B2E, business to employee.
Sophisticated stuff. I'm saying like I'm focused on self-serve.
No, and that's what I'm saying.
If you match.
Sorry, guys. Just I'm starting to jump into the mute just a tiny bit here, just so I can get some control over this. I'm loving the back and forth. But one thing that I will say, like to Isaiah's credit, is that, and Yoav, as you know, a lot of people have been hesitant to engage at all with Oro, and that kind of frustrates me. And I have a lot of respect for Isaiah as a Magento partner, being willing to come on and talk. And I think he's very open-minded. And so I'm sure your goal here is to close him as a partner or by the end of the call. But one of the things I think is interesting, I mean, we're talking about sort of the trade-offs between having this really native functionality to Oro with things like pricing versus implementing it with Magento, which is maybe not the most optimum theoretical way to build it. But what's interesting to me about what Isaiah is saying is that they've actually built this for a Fortune 100 company. They've got 10,000 customers, 1,000 SKUs, whatever that number is.
So I want to. We didn't actually end up doing exactly all of this. This was all scoped out. So so I don't want to clarify something that's not.
And that's why I'll be worried about phase 2, phase 3. And again, this is where we were heading, right? So we were doing these B2B implementation on Magento, and we also scoped it out. And again, believe me, when I was younger, I would say I can do anything with code. So I would sell anything that I believed I could do. I'm being honest to myself right now. I think in retrospect, we were able to deliver in phase 1. And as soon as we get into phase 2 and 3, we started hitting walls, scalability issues. We couldn't do this features. Let me run into one feature that I really think that is one that we learned that we were underserving this industry. is what we call the workflow approach, and specifically on the checkout. So again, when we talk in B2B, we have this kind of saying, you know, the bigger B wins. And what does that mean? It means when you're in a B2B relationship, the bigger company determines how they're going to interact with the smaller one. And that can be the seller, but that can also be the buyer. And in a lot of the use cases that we're seeing, for example, one of our customer where Whole Foods is their customer, Whole Foods would not use the same features like everybody else because that's not how they operate. But that's a big enough customer for our customer to kind of build a custom interaction with the website in order for them to actually work with it. And that will allow our customer, the seller, to reduce the cost that they need in order to maintain one of their largest accounts. To do that in Magento, you would go and customize. And specifically here, I can describe kind of the use case. And this is a hypothetical, so don't say I mentioned how Whole Foods work or whatever. But let's say you have these stores, and a regional office manages these stores, and every store has to put in the orders directly. But the regional office has to approve that. And that goes to every region. And then once a month, the regional office has to get an invoice and pay it per all the stores, right? All this process. You would tell me that's no problem. I can customize it on Magento. And I would say, sure, you can, no problem. But now you have two checkouts, one for everybody else and one specifically done for this use case. And we can do a simpler one where maybe you have just an order approval. Any order above a certain amount has to go through a manager's approval. You tell me again, we can customize it. We see how this customization process starts to get harder and harder as you get more and more of these customers that have specific requirements in order for them to use your website.
Yeah.
So our approach to that, and something we learned that we could not scale, and you, if you know Magento, you know how hard it is to customize the checkout. We said, let's do everything, all major processes in the system with the workflow approach, meaning that you can configure the workflow. And for us, the checkout, the quote process, the RFQ process, creating users in the system, anything you can think about, publishing products, pages, whatever you want to do, is a workflow-based process. We do offer default or out-of-the-box processes or workflows, but you can definitely customize them, and you can literally have different users on the front end and the back end interact with the system completely different from each other and maintain it constantly for everyone without the need to go and customize the same checkout for everybody over and over again. And that's a huge, huge difference for B2B, because again, when B2B companies start to go online, they're very naive about what they'll end up having because they don't know. And when we sell them this approach of the B2C, where we're going to optimize the checkout, where we're serving grandmothers and grandfathers and students in the same platform and the same checkout, because our goal is to get them in and out for the highest average order amount from our website, that's not the B2B use case. That's definitely not the B2B use case. In order for a customer to use your website, and even in a self-serve model, if it doesn't match their processes, they will not use your website. They will pick up the phone. So again, this is another one and a really key feature, and this goes across the board. We have corporate accounts. We have the CRM functionality, which we're not talking about. Having the your sales team and scaling your backend to actually be used. There's so many features that B2B are different than B2C. So again, I do agree with you. Smaller ones, or if the implementation is very naive and you want to just get going, maybe anything can do it. But when you go to the next levels, when you start onboarding customers, when you want to start being successful doing that, there's a lot of differences between the B2B world and the B2C world, and that's something that, again, I hope that you follow up with us, and we'll get deeper and show you why we should help B2B companies. Our solution.
I definitely respect, your passion about all this, because I think there's so much complexity to all this, and I think that no platform by itself can handle all these use cases, right? Like out of the box.
Well, I think ours can.
I think you're a little biased there. Every use case
I designed it, so I think. And again, look, we're going through implementation. I don't think there's
any platform that can handle every B2B use case. That's crazy.
But again, we do offer. Sorry, Clay, we do offer the flexibility and extendability the same way that you would see it in Magento. So again, remember what I said in the beginning. We like to bring customers anywhere from 70 to 80% of the way.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
20%, it's definitely going to be.
And we take the same philosophy. Like, we don't want to suggest a solution that we think is going to be like 80%. So if we think it's going to be over that ratio, then we might as well just build it in Laravel or Symfony. That's how we kind of view it. So
or
it's like,
Oro. So you see, again, that's what you have to match it to the
it's
right
not like
solution.
we're taking on these Magento projects being like, oh, we're going to do 80% custom. Like we have a very thorough discovery process so that we don't get ourselves in the trouble that I potentially was in 2012, like you said, being a young kid saying yes to everything. Like I wouldn't be making money if I was still doing
right.
One thing,
but I do totally like, I think there's just so much opportunity for all, in B2B, and I do think Magento is doing a good job of growing in that space, and they're obviously the top B2B, top 300 B2B. They've won that, and they're doing well in the space. So you can't say they're not succeeding or they don't work. I mean, yeah, maybe there's certain areas where you have to customize, but overall, I think they're doing a really good job.
I have to not really agree with that stat you just gave. Unfortunately, I mean that's a lot of marketing, and both companies, I'll be honest, both Oro and Magento are good at marketing. But I think that's a marketing statement. That's not a real statement. And if you show me any of the use cases. Okay, if you said that, the number one B2B implementation on Magento Imagine 2017 is moving to Oro. They're not satisfied with their implementation on B2B. So, and they won the best B2B website. What's that?
Can you share who that is?
I rather write not, but it's on our website and everything. So I don't want to put them on the spot. I didn't ask permission to do this, but it's true.
But it's on the website.
So go find it. No, I mean, they're one of our. You have to do the 2 and 2 and check who was the winner last year and then who was.
I think you're always going to see, a few unhappy customers when you're talking about a platform.
No, it's not talking about a few. We're talking about your statement of saying that Magento is, serving the B2B and growing and investing in it. That's not true. They created an extension. Let's be honest about what their investment was for B2B. They created an extension by a third-party company in Ukraine that they hired to do a few features that you can market and sell as B2B, but they don't go really deep. Just customization.
Which extension? Which extension?
They created a B2B enterprise.
So I can't speak to how they did it or what they've done, and
this is the first I've heard of that. What do you mean that? Sorry, I'm gonna have to use the mute button. This is getting wild.
Yeah.
What's the third party company that created the B2B extension?
Some outsourcing company in Ukraine that was hired to build an extension that has some of these highlighted B2B features. And if Isaiah is saying that they're a leader in this market, I think that they have to show something real on the technology, not just build an extension on top of their core product that overrides some of the real core features of Magento. So again, going back to what I said before, for example, their price implementation overrides the default price engine of Magento. That kind of nullifies a lot of the extensions that are going to be related to pricing in Magento. So again, it was not done as a core product. It was done as something quick and dirty to come and say Magento has something to serve the B2B market. It's from, again, I'll put an asterisk around this, but from what we found and what we know interacting with partners that are both Oro and Magento partners, this extension was not even supported in the latest versions of Magento 2. So this is an extension that is easy to demo. I agree with that. But if you start going deep, it's an extension, and that's what it is. It's not a real product built for B2B. It doesn't scale. It suffers from performance if you really try to implement pricing schemas on it. If you try to run a lot of customer accounts with multiple users, you get into issues with that. So again, it's an afterthought. It's a quick lipstick on the pig that was done to say Magento is in B2B, and the rest is marketing, dude. I mean, if you buy into that, that's great. That's great. But I want to say, check and verify before you just buy into any statement.
Yeah, no, trust me, I'm the biggest skeptic, but in terms of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I have to go off of what's working for us and what's working for our customers, and we're executing on projects and getting better every single month across the board.
I believe you, but be honest with me. Did you check Oro and compare what you want?
No, but so
sorry, I
have nothing against Oro. Let me just explain my thought on the agency world. So I have nothing. I'm sure you're doing great stuff, and obviously you're a brilliant guy. And I wish John was here, our CTO, because he could speak more fairly to these.
Hey, I'm CEO. You're CEO.
Yeah, but you're traditionally a CTO. So, but I'm traditionally more of a CEO. I'm more of a business oriented person. So, I look at it from many different angles, and I think the challenge with an agency bringing on a new platform, it's hard to. It's honestly hard to work. And I've tried it with some of these other platforms, and I don't want to even specifically name them because I think they're good people, but like, it's just hard to take on new platforms that don't have a large user base because it's hard to market. And that's why I think the community effect is so powerful, because I think the community solves a lot of those problems.
Generates
And,
leads for you.
yeah, no, not just that, but also the themes. That's why I think Magento and Shopify are so successful, because Magento and Shopify are the two platforms that I can confidently say we can stand up a front end super quick and like a decent front end, because the theme marketplace between the two is very mature. For instance, and so, another good example is WordPress. Like, WordPress core platform is super basic, but it just has an amazing community. So,
and again,
I buy into the
size,
communities. I buy into the communities, and that's working really well for us. And I think Magento has an amazing community, and I think they recognize, any problems, and they're working towards any of that. So I respect that, and I think they're doing a great job there. But I think, and I'm not trying to, like, shortchange anyone here. And I think you guys are doing some. It sounds, I don't really know much about your platform, to be honest. So, and I'm sure you guys are doing some amazing stuff, but we have to stick to our guns of what's like. We don't even feel like we've begun to tap into our potential with the existing platform. So it's like, it's a hard thing to we have to balance kind of diversifying.
Sure, and I'll be completely honest with you. It's we actually we're going head to head more with Hybris than Magento on our.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that.
And so I'll be honest with you. And again, I'm not trying to belittle anybody or any partner.
Yeah,
partners that are doing great. They're growing because they're doing Magento and building their Magento business, and they're making a lot of money doing that. It's hard to move to another technology. But the point that we were talking about is, are you, because of limitations of your company and your ability to scale, is that the honest solution that your customer needs? That's the question. And what you said is, but we still can get by using Magento, and that's what you said. And the argument is,
yeah, but it's not that we can get by.
One thing that I'll say, sorry, just to jump in here real quick, is that I've been wanting to mention was that somebody I know that was looking pretty seriously at Oro and was interested in it. One of the issues that they hit was that they have a B2C component and a B2B component.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to remember what the percentage split was. I want to say maybe 70% B2B, not entirely sure. And they ended up, for them, the B2C component wasn't strong enough with Oro.
Right.
And that was a reason why they went back to the Magento side of things. And I think that's probably a common thing. And you've made that concession yourself, that for a certain size company, or as a company scales to a certain size, Oro is going to start to make more sense. It kind of hinges on what we mean exactly by what that size is, or what the constraints are that really make it matter. But I mean, and me, I'm totally open. I mean, I'm having you on. I'm a big fan of everything you do. And so I've heard from people that, look, Oro wasn't a fit. Their B2C wasn't strong enough. And so I think there's a real use case.
To that point, I mean, I think what we're focused on is, like I said, more the self-serve B2B model. I think that is just like, the room for growth and opportunity there is just insane. Like I said, I see people doing 10 million online with some crazy old crap site, and I think we can do a great job. We have the processes in place to do a great job in Magento for those kind of clients. And obviously we like to do really custom stuff, and we're doing some pretty cool stuff with multi-site, which I think we have a lot of room to grow with the multi-site of Magento. And our CTO has a lot of experience with that, so that's pretty cool. But and I think it sounds like with Oro, there's a lot of cool stuff going on with some of these other types of B2B stuff that you were talking about, like the financial services. But right now, I think, at least with Trellis specifically, like, there's just so much opportunity in the self-serve B2B space, that's where we see just a lot of growth.
If you're about growing your business and solving it using Magento, which is the platform of choice of your company, that's what you are. You're a Magento shop, but you're not a real.
No, but that's not exactly true, though, because we do
WooCommerce.
We do platform analysis. So we worked with WooCommerce, we work with Shopify, we work with BigCommerce. I've evaluated some of the other platforms like NetSuite, Order Cloud. some of the headless platforms. So I've evaluated a lot of different platforms. I'm always evaluating platforms, and it all comes back to the community is not big enough for me. Like that's the problem that I find with some of these other ones, is that I just don't feel like it's going to be worth the effort for us to work with, because we have to create a process around every platform, right? And so as an agency, we have to create a process and be confident that there's, answers online, there's good documentation, which I'm sure you know very well about, and I'm sure you've worked hard on that at Oro, but and not every platform has that as good as other platforms. So there's just so many factors that goes into being an agency and making a platform successful that like we just have to pick our battles. And I hope we grow to the point where we're doing all the leading platforms at some point, but we have to get a lot bigger to do that in a fair way to our customers, because I don't want to spread too thin. And I still think like just with Magento and Shopify, we have so much room to grow. It's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the SMB and specifically the small businesses, it's a huge market, right? And all the platforms you described, Shopify, Magento, BigCommerce, they do a really good job for small merchants, and like I said, maybe $10 million. But again, if you're looking at companies that are B2B, some of them are not that small. Some of them are really trying to transform their business. And again, it's where the solution will not scale for them using a B2C solution, which is, again, the topic of this conversation. So as such, again, if I would be an SI and we do that, I mean, again, there's difference between being, we started as an OS Commerce shop, right, at the very end and all that. And that's what we did. If somebody came to us, we said, we do OS Commerce, right? And they would say, but we really like .NET. And we said, we don't do that, right? So that's the difference, right? Or if the use case that they came to us was not solvable with OS Commerce, or we would come with an estimate that's too big, they would say that's not a good fit. So again, all we're trying to talk here is what the best fit is for a specific use case. Again, it will be a range and it will be a spectrum. It's never going to be one or the other. There are benefits of using, community. It's funny because we kind of eating our own words here, but the reason we created Magento and with so much flexibility on the front end design, and of course we brought the same thing to Oro, is that again we believed back then that no two companies want to use the same theme, and then these theme shops and all that started. So again, I agree that a lot of people with low budgets and low expectations, they would use off the shelf theme.
But I think what we're seeing is that some of these bigger companies, and it depends, some are more sophisticated than others, but some of these big companies, they just need to get the basics right, and they're not even doing that. So
but they will come usually with, again, it depends on the size, but a lot of the more serious companies, they will come with a design guide. So you won't be able to take a theme off the shelf and say, okay, I'll put this logo here and we're done.
Yeah, you might have to custom build a theme, or sometimes what we do, depending on the situation, is we'll use a theme as kind of a foundation and customize to, depending on it, we kind of look at that ratio like you're talking about, the percentage.
Again, it's weighing the options.
And by the way, in the chat, Sam Bayer said, sorry, Yoav, not true. We are pushing hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue for Fortune 100 companies on the Magento platform. There
are definitely people doing it. I mean, I've heard that they're now.
What are they doing? Sorry, I'm not clear about the statement.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of dollars for what?
I guess maybe he can clarify, but I'm assuming he's talking about a B2B merchant.
Yeah, there's definitely.
What is the use case? We've seen some of these implementation where it's a B2B company, like, I don't know, can be Caterpillar or whatever. But if the use case is where they're selling their hats and T-shirts, that's not a B2B use case. So again, we need to see what's the actual implementation, what's the actual use case. We can't just go by the brand and say this is a B2B company using some platform. Tesla is using Shopify.
No, I agree.
It's not like they're selling cars on Shopify.
That it is all about the use case, because to your point, like, some platforms tout big customers, but it's just like, I agree. It's
That's
about
marketing. That's a lot of marketing. We have to get into the nitty gritty and understand what they're actually doing.
But I think there are some extremely robust implementations of Magento that are doing really impressive stuff.
And extremely robust cost. That's where we're coming in to say, and the ownership of what ends up to be the responsibility of the customer versus the platform. Again, anything can be done with code. We started with that point, right? So no disagreement that anything can be done. The question is, how much is the customer responsible for this later, and how much they're going to end up being responsible? Again, Magento does not support any customizations. Let's remind ourselves of that. So if you're customizing the core features of the product and then they're not supported, then you're left hang to dry and responsible for these kind of features. Whereas again, if we're arguing that these are core for a successful B2B implementation, you also want a vendor that will back up those features and not tell you, too bad, those are customizations you made or your SI made, you're responsible to do this. That's what we're talking about. Again, so we have to be very, again, I don't want to say that this is technical, but this is part of what you have to recommend a customer. You're saying, look, we can do anything with anything. And again, I'm a big supporter of that. The question is, why is the customer paying for it? And then how much of that he will be responsible for later?
Yeah.
Sam clarified he's talking about Honeywell selling research chemicals around the world, Merck selling medicine to veterinarians. I know this is coming on the chat and we can't really
I can verify it. I can
I think the other
we're just throwing that in
the
there.
reason I go back to the community is that, like, at the end of the day, anything can be done with code, right? So like you could just use Magento as a backend and have, like, they're working on the React layer or whatever, and I think that's kind of the future, and we're kind of investing in that from an intellectual standpoint and just like overall mindset standpoint, the PWA, and we're actually kind of in the process of doing some pretty cool stuff with PWAs and WordPress and everything, Shopify, Magento. So I mean, but I think that's why I think the community is so important, and I want the platforms to consolidate and
again, when you say community, our community is actually, like I said, tying into one of the largest PHP communities in the world, which is the Symfony community.
Yeah,
so
that's smart.
A lot of innovation, performance, scalability. We're talking to I would say even the largest PHP community for single product, except the Joomla, Drupal, and stuff like that. But when it comes to lower level framework work, we are tied into the biggest community in the world right now. So when it comes to innovation, we're tied to the most innovative framework right now on the market. I'll be honest with that. So again, that's the reason we selected it and not went and created our own. I mean, I'll be honest about that, which is what Magento did. Magento 2 is their own kind of, so when you're saying it's let's say we'll go with their number, 300,000 developers that they say they have in the community, right? Again, that's still a small fraction of any other community that's on a framework level, right, with coders and people that are actually writing code and developing it on that and running into scalability issues or any kind of innovative things like APIs and PWA, whatever you want. It's still a small fraction of other communities that are on the technology layer.
That's not entirely apples to apples, though, because
it is if Magento is responsible for the framework.
If somebody's a Symfony developer, they're not necessarily
exactly. So let me
I want to get that point.
Just in the same way that somebody's a PHP developer, they're not necessarily a Magento developer.
Yeah, but if somebody is a Symfony developer, they are an Oro developer, because Oro is full stack application built on Symfony platform.
But then why wouldn't they just use Symfony? Like, so there's obviously
because they won't have to recreate all the features from scratch. Again, you have to determine what a framework. You said you're not a technologist. I don't want to start beating you up on that, but you have to determine what's the responsibility of the framework versus of the platform of the product.
I've hired so many developers. I've been through this kind of stuff, and I just think that there's a huge advantage of being able to use Commerce Hero, and I know I can get a good developer like instantly from Kalen that's ready to go on Magento 2 or Magento 1 or whatever, and I hope, so I just think that there's just so much value in the community, and I don't want to.
Yeah, I agree. That's why we picked Symfony as the community we're basing.
But you've got to have deep familiarity. I mean, to say that
of any domain, any domain. So you're adding the framework.
If somebody's going to hire a developer for a complex implementation of a $500 million B2B merchant on Oro, you're not going to want to bring them, hey, here's a Symfony developer.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Actually, you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. And again, we can hire Symfony developers, and there is a learning curve of learning the domain of B2B commerce, learning the functionality of Oro. Now, reverse the thing. You want to create a $500 million Magento website. What are you going to publish for? Only Magento developers, especially on Magento 2. Before we could say, some Zen framework, you maybe can.
I agree that there's a strength to building solidly. I agree that's a smart strategy to build solidly on a framework. Magento
and also
doesn't
the community
have that
side.
same
The community
corollary.
side. Yeah,
I agree. That's a smart decision, but it's not the same as saying that the Oro community is as strong.
And
I did not say that as strong. I'm saying that, again, a lot of our technologies, when you say the community is small, again, you have to kind of back up this statement and look what you're saying. What are you talking about? Again, the Magento 2 community is very small because it's pretty new product, a pretty new technology. It's a year and a half on the market. Yeah, it's new technology on the market, being proven over and over again right now. Lesson learned constantly. That's not the case with Oro, because again, a lot of, and like I don't want to say a bad word, but 70% of what we do is based on the firmware. We're a full stack.
You can say bad words.
Symfony application, right?
Yeah.
And that means that
but we're seeing
so when we upgraded to Symfony 3 right now, right? Our next version is based on Symfony 3. The framework was updated. We got all the new technologies that they bring. We got all the improvements in performance and security, etc. We tied to a bigger. We did what you're saying. When I came to create a product, right now we're in the product level and decisions making on that and why we should tie to a bigger one. I made the decision to go with one of the largest communities, exactly like what you said, but it's on the framework level. In the Magento 2, you're tying to a big community of the commerce part, but not on the technology level.
Right. Actually, good question here from Zach Stutzman in the chat. And I totally get the argument on the Symfony thing, and that's an interesting one. But can we get an idea of the size of the Oro community, just in terms of people that are, I don't know, in the forums or specifically working with Oro?
Yeah. So what we are tracking right now is what we call active installs. We have, like I said, we have this pinging feature exactly like Magento 1 had, where you log into the admin, it contacts or pings us for notification, new versions, etc. So we can see how many unique domains are running it, and how many, we kind of count ones that log in multiple times to the admin. We surpassed 300,000 what we call active installs of our products. So that's what we can track. Like with any community, no one really knows. Even in Magento, unfortunately, it's all estimations. Let's be honest. We've done that. I know how it was done there as well. So that's how many installs we have. We have a growing number of SIs right now. A lot of the Magento SIs are now also Oro SIs. A number of extensions. I think that's something that we learned a bad lesson from Magento. It was a Wild West. I think Magento is still trying to figure out how this extension world works. And for me, that's not a good indication necessarily of how active the platform is. It's more about the quality of that. Again, when I left, there was 8,500 extensions in the marketplace. And I think we went down to maybe 300 that were actually usable after cleaning up the themes and actually how many of them were actually usable. And the market size on that was about, total revenue going around there was 5 million, which is kind of small compared to the ecosystem that you.
But sorry, so how many Oro developers?
We have over 20,000 registered community users on our community. Again, our forums are probably not as active as Magento's yet, but again, it's a growing number on a daily basis. We just surpassed, like I said, 20,000 users on our community website.
Oh, nice. Okay. And by the way, I'm fully aware of the irony of talking about the strength of the Magento community, which you built in large part. And
yeah, but we also learned from it. So again, I think this is going to be the hardest one, I think, for people to swallow. But in Magento, we had the strategy that we did not rely on the community for the core development of the product. Right. This is something that was key for Magento to continue moving forward, being able to support our code and our functionality. And what happens is that the latest version of Magento was mostly community contributions. Now, that sounds really good for the community, but that's not long-term thinking in my opinion, and it's definitely not for customers, because that was something that worried me at Magento and still worries me here. You cannot build a product with the community members, and as much respect as I have for communities, and I really do, I think that if they're actively developing core features that are sold to customers, that's a bad habit, because we know developers, and especially like Isaiah here, he has his own priorities, right? If tomorrow he's getting hired for some big job, that's what he should take, and that's what he should do. They're not getting paid to create these Magento extensions that they're creating and then that are bundled into the core. So as the vendor, you want to have control on that. You want to make sure that you can upgrade. So we took a big lesson that we learned from Magento is, first of all, don't bloat the core product. Don't just add functionality that nobody uses. And in my experience, I think maybe 30% of the features we created in Magento were actually used. I'm sometimes really upset about some of the cool ones that I did and nobody's actually using, so whatever. But I think, going to the level of evolving the community into the core product, that's a very risky kind of approach for me. But I think that's the only thing they could do to kind of show that they're moving ahead with the product on the latest version. So again, we're not developing the product on the feature level with the community. We definitely get contributions on a daily basis. We definitely get tested for any kind of vulnerabilities, testing for scalability and stuff like that. Again, I was actually scolded by Magento for doing that for the Magento 2, so I'm afraid not to contribute anything on that. But we actually welcome that. We welcome use cases where we see if we don't scale properly or if we need to improve. So on that, I think the community is really active. I think where the practice of involving core functionality based on community developers is a bit risky for me right now. Again, so I would take into account the role of the community in the development of the core product.
But I mean, can you say that is that true about WordPress? I mean, WordPress is, I mean, they kind of are controlled by Automatic, but I would argue that WordPress is probably the most impressive open source project in terms of the pure scale that it's being used on the internet.
And the most vulnerable.
Yeah, but we've actually found a lot of success.
Yeah, you can say that when you say e-commerce and say, yeah, it's the most vulnerable for a reason.
It's not really vulnerable if you actually update the plugins and use and follow best practices. So, I mean, we built a massive WordPress site. I mean, and we've had a ton of success with that. It's probably one of our main flagship products.
Absolutely. We're using WordPress for our community website.
I guess I don't know if I 100% agree with that. I do agree that it's good to have, the company play a strong role in the quality control of the product, but I think that
and longevity and support. So again, once a feature is contributed, it has to be supported going on, right? Yeah. So if a feature is contributed, then it becomes a core feature available to all customers. In the next version, if that developer is not updating his extension, you have a problem right now upgrading your customer. So either the vendor starts owning that feature, or you as an SI are going to be responsible because you're not going to be able to find that third-party developer that created that extension. This has happened to us. Again, if you want to go back in history, that's how we started doing the API for Magento, and that's why Magento 1's API never got caught up with the actual product, because we were relying on the third-party company to do and build the API for the Magento project early on. When it came to release version 1, they disappeared on us, and we had the half-working version. So we were always in a catch-up mode on the API of Magento 1 to actually have that with the product, because we relied on a very core feature on a third-party solution that, again, I can't blame them. They got really busy, they got a big contract, and they couldn't deliver on time what they promised us.
So does Oro not have developers that contribute to?
No, we have of course we have people that are contributing, but this is on a patch level, not on a complete feature that we're selling then to customers. They absolutely contributed. Yeah, not a complete feature.
And I think it's a little. I actually don't know offhand how the percentages break down. I believe it was 20-30% of the code contributed was from the community, but I want to say, and somebody can correct me in the chat, I'm assuming most of that probably was bug fixes. I don't know if it'd be interesting to know what the percentage of new features like multi-source inventory and things like that versus the percentage that was just, I did an interview with one of the top Magento contributors recently, and he was just talking about how you're doing a project, you run into a bug, you file it as a pull request.
Yeah, but that's how we work as well. Yeah, I mean, all GitHub world, GitHub era, right? We're all working like that. Our partners, our developers, as they find and create pull requests, any bug fixes we take as well. And of course, bug fixes, that's great if you have an active community. I'm talking about actual deep features that are being sold right now.
Yeah.
As much as right now, the same use case with the B2B extension for Magento, which is a third-party solution that was created.
I don't know. I've never heard that it was a third party. This is the first time I heard it was a third party.
So the only thing that I know is
talk to the right people.
Well, you got to bring some proof if you're going to say that. You
ask them then. Let them disprove it. I mean, if you want, I'll give you the
I trust John, our CTO, and he's done amazing work for us. And he speaks pretty highly of some of the recent work that's been done on Magento 2. So in terms of 2.2 and the newer releases. So yeah, I mean, I guess to me, it's like, as an agency, I'm looking at the market and I'm looking at the big players, and I'm interested to see how the market evolves. But I guess we'll see. I mean,
we have a lot to see. Yeah,
I think by pure market cap, you could argue that Shopify is the most valuable e-commerce platform, but they're not even doing anything compared to what you're talking about, or to what Magento or Oro might be doing in terms of B2B. They're still kind of they're just capitalizing on a lot of the smaller opportunities, but they're somehow still arguably the most
No,
value.
they're eating into the Magento.
But
like
Magento is
B2C, right?
also grown by like 20 times. I mean, what they sold to eBay for what 50 million, and now they just got sold for 1.6 billion, or I don't know what the numbers.
Those are not correct numbers. But
This is gonna be
What was the
interesting.
what was
Take on the acquisition.
what
This
was
is
the,
gonna.
what was the number? No, but what was the number for Magento's sale to eBay? What was
I'll let you research that, but it's
How
not.
much did you make, Yoav? That's what I want to
You want my
Yeah.
bank account? I mean,
So, all right. I mean, I'm sure we can just pull it up. I'm sure.
so let me say this. Let me say this.
So it's
Value of a
growing, I
company. Again, you have to look at what the actual revenues, and they were sold at about 11 times their revenues. Again, it's about strategic to Adobe. If you wanted to get into this acquisition,
absolutely, I agree. Valuation is not the big all.
valuation is
All I'm
not
trying
what
to
you-
all I'm trying to say is that it does. I mean, the size of the money and the investment going into this stuff. Now they have Adobe backing them. I mean, it's just they're
Well, that can be good, or like we proved, that
they
can
have a
also
lot
work
of
not
money
so
to
well.
grow
So
this, and I think they're doing a lot of great stuff. And we see them improving day by day. So I mean, I don't
Actually,
know.
you're right.
I guess I really don't have anything. And and I'm speaking from a really objective standpoint because if I saw a better opportunity, like we're just trying to make money, right? So as a third party that can go do whatever we want, right? Like we're not a platform. I would go find that platform and do it. But like right now, I mean, I'd say Magento and Shopify are just it's interesting because they both have such different
for the SMB
use
world, I will
cases,
not disagree
but
with
they're
you.
just
B2C,
dominating.
SMB.
Quick question,
They're
if I
just
could just
dominating.
jump
Yeah.
in here. Question from Nicholas in the chat, which I probably should have asked a lot earlier. How many stores do you have on Oro Commerce?
Again, the ones we're aware of, we're approaching about 100 that are launching or in soft launch. A big problem with the B2B world, a lot of them are completely locked down. So, again, don't kill me, Shell, but Shell is running their lubricant store on their shell.com domain on our platform. And, it's not very visible to anybody that doesn't know about that store. So
Right. That's a problem with the nature of B2B stuff, is it's
and again, I just want to say the implementations are with Magento we launched, and a lot of the use cases in B2C are kind of similar, or at least a lot of people treated it as similar. We're finding, specifically for a site that want to do a lot of money, we're finding that a lot of times B2B, there are this 20 to 30% customizations are very big in terms of culture for the company, not only the work that has to be done, but also the amount of scope that is actually working there. So it's taking them time to launch. We do a lot of soft launches. We do a lot of multi-organization or multiple countries launches. So we start small countries first, then we go to bigger countries. So it is. I don't think the technology is where we're slowing down. I think a lot of times it's this transformation the company is going through that's taking them longer to launch. So again, we've been on the market for a year and a half, over 100 live websites today that we know about. Using the commerce piece of this, not talking about the CRM. We have a few thousands there around the community, and then a few over a few hundred that are paying for it. So again, it's still going and growing. And like I said, I think this is something that the whole transformation of B2B companies is happening a bit slower than everybody expected. It's not so easy as it looks on the strategy side.
Right.
Yeah.
Whew. Well,
I think there's so much to talk about, and I think that it's hard to make fair points across the board, but I think that B2B is just, we're still in the very early stages. Like we have a lot to figure out in the community, and I'm interested to see how it evolves. I mean, we're really excited about where we're at, but with the platforms that we're using, and we're excited with what they're doing, and the relationships. Our relationships with Magento specifically has grown a lot. Obviously, we started late, and that was challenging. We started like late to the game, so in a lot of ways, I feel like we've had to become as best as you possibly could to like move up the chain, because we didn't have the luxury of like starting in the early stages of the partnership. So.
Well, it wasn't necessarily luxury. A lot of them suffered. They start.
Yeah, but you get, maybe, but yeah, I mean, I guess I just think that it's easy to make like these arguments, but at the end of the day, like you just have to look at, to your point, use cases, and I'm curious to see how Oro does over the next 5-10 years, but Magento's still like by the use case numbers, total revenue I think going through the platform is what, like 50 billion or 100 billion. Isn't it number one by total revenue? Maybe it's 200 billion. So what's interesting is that Magento has by far the most total revenue compared to Shopify, but Shopify is capitalizing on every customer because they have the software as a service model. So like, I don't know. I think you can make the argument that the Magento is by far the number one e-commerce platform. But it all depends on how you argue this stuff. Like it kind of just.
Well, we're not arguing that point that they're the number one B2C e-commerce platform. Nobody's arguing that right now.
So much of their revenue is B2B, but like
we don't know. Yeah. And again, these claims are not open, so we can't actually see it. So,
but
we asked them to join, and I would love to learn that.
Even if you feel very strongly that you have the better product for the use case, you would, I'm sure, agree that at the current state of things, Magento does far more volume in terms of B2B.
Again, I need to see I can't say for sure in B2C again, and you're talking about a 10-year-old product versus a 1.5-year-old product in terms of revenue. So yeah, we're smaller. Okay, I'll take that. But we won according to Frost and Sullivan. We're better fitted for the use case.
But that's marketing. That's marketing. But
no, that's the same marketing you use.
That's
right?
marketing. Let me go back.
Are you claiming?
Can I ask a clear question?
I could get a thing from Frost and Sullivan saying that Trellis is the best agency in the world,
But I asked a pretty black and white question, and you don't want to give the black and white answer.
Where's the $200 billion price coming from? Who verified that one?
So that's the thing that's tough about Magento is that Magento has their enterprise customers, right? So it's so interesting because Magento has their enterprise customers, and they're making a lot of revenue through that, but that's only a fraction of the money. So no one knows the exact number of all the revenue going through Magento. It's impossible because there's according to Built With, I just checked, they updated their
marketing
thing. No, but Built With is pretty accurate, I would say. I actually find Built With to be
that's accurate. Okay, so yeah, we selected
at least Built With, if I look at a site and it says by Magento, I've done like one-to-one comparisons, actually know that it's the platform and checked on Built With, and I found it to be pretty accurate. It's not perfect because they don't have server side, they don't have access to the servers, but they say they have 400,000 installs of Magento, and only maybe 5,000 of those are enterprise. So, I don't know the exact numbers. So that's what I'm saying. The Magento community, who knows? I mean, it could be more than 200 billion online.
No. I think you're now mixing something. The 200 billion includes the community.
It does, but it's just an estimate. So because no one knows.
Absolutely, it's an estimate, and you know how they did that estimate. So again, I've done these estimates when we sold the company the first time.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I talk to so many e-commerce companies, prospects and leads, and I just look at the data. I've talked to so many that have tons of different platforms I've never heard of before.
Isaiah, again, we're not arguing here if Magento is the biggest beast in the room. We're not. They are the biggest ones. They're number one.
There we go.
There's no argument on the B2C use case. Absolutely, they're the biggest. Are they the best one? That's a different discussion today. But the biggest is not always the best, and we proved that with Magento. When I was sitting on 8 or 10 years ago, that was the same arguments I was having when they invited me to Intershop, when they invited me to sit with ATG, when I sold it to customers of big companies back then, IBM WebSphere.
Right.
That was my argument, right? And you're giving me now that because they're the biggest, they're the best. I proved that wrong one time. So again, this argument has some.
But I think I respect your argument that the biggest doesn't always mean the best, and I understand that. But I think that I think that they're just in a unique position where they can serve. They're the only platform that I feel that I can confidently serve my customers, because I have to put my name behind every implementation, and I have to hear when customers are pissed off. They come to me.
Right.
So it's the only platform that we can work with small all the way to very large customers. And I just don't think that there's. I would love for there to be something else in the market, but I've been doing this for 7 years, and I still haven't seen another platform that can do B2B, B2C, and small and medium and large customers.
And you said you didn't look at Oro, so
I've
obviously.
I've also, I know, at least a couple agencies I can think of that have gotten into the Oro space, and one of them ended up backing out. I know there's only 2 data points, and one of them is not doing the greatest with it. So I don't know exactly what that is. Maybe it's the sales cycle that you talked about, Yoav. And obviously, it's not just about what sells the best. That is an important factor for agencies. And like you're saying, you're early on, you're basically doing the same thing you did with Magento of creating something new. You're in an early stage, and you're going to grow very quickly and effectively. But that is something that I've heard, as somebody that I like to think I'm pretty objective. Yeah. I've heard that from people. They've gotten into the space. And I thought, when I heard about it, I was like, man, they're going to kill it. Oro is on a hockey stick. And then they ended up pulling out, and I didn't. Who knows exactly why that is, but
right. But again, it's not only the market size. It's about also the fit of the product. So again, we were coming to the market, and I'll be completely transparent with you. We were thinking that we're going to hit the same market size or company size as Magento. If it turns out that we're seeing much larger customers much faster than we saw them in the Magento timeline. And we're dealing with much bigger companies. Now, I don't want this to turn into throwing anybody under the bus, but a lot of the Magento partners that we worked with come, like I said, they're doing great money, they're growing. There's such a lot of work in the Magento ecosystem right now. That's great. And if you're an SI, that's what you want to do. You want to make money and grow as much as you can. Right. The reality is that in the B2B, to be successful, you also have to have another facet to your kind of services that you're providing, and it's actually going and spending time on the BA work much more than you'll do in B2C. Much more, from my experience, that you have to do in the B2C. And the business analyst to actually match the customer with a good solution that actually helps them go through the transformation and be able to kind of lead the way right now. Because again, with B2C, a lot of times today, the SIs, Magento, Shopify, whatever, they're regarded as best practices already. Again, we created Magento as a platform. It turned out to be an out-of-the-box product already. Hey, Magento's checkout is best practices. Magento design is best practice now. That's not how we designed it, but that's what it became. When we come to B2B, it's a greenfield. A lot of the companies don't know what they want. We're sitting with companies and have to lead them to tell them what are the new best practices for that scenario. So again, a lot of times we found out that, unfortunately, the Magento partners did not want to invest in that because there's easy money, downloading Magento, slapping on a theme, another few extensions, and we're done, and we made 50 grand, versus going and spending time learning with the customer what they need, months, maybe even a year, to understand before you actually write a line of code. And that's the difference in this, again, the space, and it's about the fit, the customer fit, right? It's not the same industry. It's not the same.
And maybe 5-10 years from now, whatever that timeline is, some of those best practices will develop. And I mean, companies like Oro, what Magento's doing, this is all really helping to transition, the world, this whole B2B world into digital transformation. And some of those best practices will kind of develop.
Yeah. Again, I just how bad it is. Again, we have a customer where all the executive team doesn't use email. Again, that's what we're talking about. So a lot of times we're really coming in with.
We need to transition this conversation from, and maybe we do a follow-up from Magento versus Oro to like, how do we evolve the B2B? Because I think there's room for multiple platforms. I do think there needs to be some consolidation to some extent, because I mean, there's just like 100, 200 platforms in e-commerce, and I think there's
not in B2B.
Well, yeah, maybe not that specialized in B2B, but they probably are still being used in some weird way because they just are.
Because they have a shopping cart.
Yeah, because they have a shopping cart. So I think that there needs to be some consolidation there, and I think everyone can agree that the big players are not really going anywhere anytime soon. But I think the B2B e-commerce landscape needs to evolve in terms of really to your point, at the company level, like the companies need to evolve and mature and learn.
And the companies, the ecosystem. We're working again with partners today that didn't or do not sell Magento, right? And for me, that's a big win, because when I was trying to sell them to become an SI with Magento, they said, no, that's not a good fit for us. And now when we're coming with Oro, they actually are signing up and becoming partners of ours, because they do see the potential and how open this market and industry is for a solution and how needed it is, and they find that Oro is the best match. So again, based on research, looking at Magento, not using Magento, you are using Oro. Just to say that there are people that are, Magento is not the whole world, right? So not the whole ecosystem comes from Magento for us today, which is great for us. And we like to be introduced to new people and new kind of partners. So I just want to put that out as well.
Mm-hmm. Just got a great question. This might be a great last question from.
Are we going on 2 hours already? Wow.
Yeah, we're going strong, you guys. We're trying to set some records here from Hotlander. I think, Yoav, I think this is Jimmy from Morello.
Might be, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, question is, what are Isaiah's and Yoav's biggest challenges you've faced regarding scalability in your respective platforms? Yoav, we'll start with you.
So our latest launch was 8.2 million SKUs with real-time inventory and real-time pricing. It's launched, it's live. Yeah. The SKU count, we were able to scale pretty fast. I think right now we're actually in a challenge of doing the site is live, taking orders. We're in the process right now of optimizing the real-time pricing. So again, we're using an old piece of code that was done for the early implementation. So that's a bit slow again, but that's something we're working on. But 8.2 million SKUs, pretty limited involvement from our end to just get this SKU count. Our next one that we started developing, 80 million SKUs. Again, B2B, man, it's a different world. It's a different world. So so we're scaling to that. I think another point is that we couldn't do this back in the day with Magento is 25,000 sales team using the backend.
Wow.
I think we need to scale the backend for that. So that's a
Did you say 25?
Yeah, 25,000. Yeah, sales reps. Yeah.
Wow.
So using the backend. So again, these are the kind of scalability we're looking in B2B. It's a little bit different than what we did in B2C. It's not all solved with caching, unfortunately. A lot of real-time stuff. So a bit different kind of scalability issues.
Nice.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I could talk about two different types of scalability. There's scalability with the actual platform and building the site. And then we have like our scalability. Like I guess for us, what's interesting is we feel confident in our development team that we don't really necessarily, we feel like we can push past the scalability of any issue and come up with a solution. It's more kind of like, it's a different perspective because we're on the agency side. Our issue is more like the client budget and the client timeline. And, it's almost never like we can't do that. It's more like, well, can you afford to pay us to do that? Right. So I guess that, from our perspective, I would like to see more B2B companies take this more seriously and stop being so scared to spend a little bit of money and realize like, look, we need to go all in on this because this is the future. And I really, really believe that. And they need to just start spending more money and throwing more manpower, not necessarily just at Trellis or an agency. They need to start hiring internally for this. They need to start hiring their own core expertise and then maybe manage a team like Trellis. Or, I wouldn't even be upset if they use their own team. I just want to see them get better at it. So, I think for us, it's the companies need to start throwing more money at it. That's the constraint that we're seeing.
I love it. So it's an SI point of view. They spend more money, we'll do it. Yeah,
awesome. Well, thanks you guys so much. It was a lot of fun. Very brave Isaiah stepping into the ring with Yoav, somebody that.
Oh, come on! I'm nice. What are you talking about?
He's very passionate, and I think like. I just want to summarize. I think you guys are doing. It sounds like you guys are doing great stuff, but you can't hate on Magento that much. They're still working. They're still doing a lot of great stuff too. Magento's innovating, and they're both. Everyone's doing great work, I think. So.
Yeah, I just want to say about the spend more money. I just remember last note for me. When we sold our solution to the government of Argentina, the answer from Magento was spend more money. So it's not always to spend more money. We were able to do 40 million front-end users logging into the system for preferences and stuff like that.
Wow.
Almost out of the box. Yeah. So again, we built a solution for the use cases, and a lot of the use cases is about what you need to scale in B2B. It's not necessarily the same thing in B2C. I'll leave with that message. Isaiah, I'm inviting you to get a demo from us. I'll convert you one day. It will take time, but I'll make you a believer.
Awesome. So in summary, Yoav agrees Magento is the clear winner in Magento.
In the B2C space, it's still the number one. The gorilla.
Someone get them some facts on, because I don't know the real numbers from the B2. We need to get the real numbers there.
Numbers. No, but thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks for everybody that was tuning into the chat. And how can people find you guys online? Starting with Yoav, best place to find you online.
Oroinc.com or orocommerce.com. Our forums are there. All the information is there. My email, yoav@oroinc.com as well. Any direct questions?
Awesome.
Twitter.
Isaiah, where can
Twitter.
Okay. And Isaiah, where can people find you online?
Just trellis.co. The only bad thing about our name is .com was taken, so we're trellis.co.
There you go. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will catch you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you.